Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint, Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Orla and I'm delighted to be joined by Tomasz Pujatek from Consultancy Digital Workplace in Poland, who will be talking to you today about modern approvals in Office 365 with Power Automate and Microsoft Teams. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC22. Don't forget to check out the Resource Centre. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click the content link at the top. Continue your learning by joining us March 9th for a webinar with Graham Walsh titled Navigating Microsoft Teams Devices for Hybrid Workplace. For more information, check out sharepointeurope.com/register for webinars. A big thank you to Docs42 who sponsored this webinar today. It's fantastic to have their support.
Hey you! In the session you will see all about the great options of the Microsoft technologies. But what about generating documents in the Microsoft ecosystem? Like quotes, reports, emails, PowerPoints, and others. The challenges usually are many different data sources, an intuitive design in Microsoft Office, and of course generating the documents where the user needs them. In SharePoint, the Power Platform, Teams, or Dynamics. Docs42 can do all of it. Try now yourself.
Call for speakers for ESP 2022 is now open. Submit to speak at sharepointeurope.com/submitspeakespc. The European Power Platform Conference will take place in Berlin, Germany from the 6th to the 8th of April 2022. This is a brand new event aiming to help 500 plus IT pros, developers and business decision makers harness the power of the Microsoft Power Platform. Save €300 on your EPPC ticket with our super early bird sale. Act fast as this offer ends in 3 days. For more information, visit sharepointeurope.com/European Power Platform Conference. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any question you have in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Centre, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to pass you over to the presenter, Tomasz. Hello, Tomasz. I think you might be muted, Tomasz.
Yep, I muted.
Very good. We can see your screen now.
Right, that's the right screen. So I'll just move this out of the screen and start the presentation. So once again, good morning, maybe good afternoon or good evening from wherever in the world you're joining this webinar. Welcome to it. And I hope that you'll have a wonderful next hour spent with me. So just a few words about myself. My name is Tomasz Pujatek. I'm coming from Warsaw in Poland. I'm the Business Applications MVP, and frankly speaking, ever since I started working with SharePoint, I as well started to work with processes. So workflows, business flows, business processes is something that I'm simply using and designing every day. And also once Power Automate or Microsoft Flow back in 2017 left private preview, I started as well learning Power Automate, and so I'm using it really for over 4 years already. If you are interested in learning more about myself or learning more from me, then I highly encourage you to go to my YouTube, where you can subscribe and have an access to all these fancy and awesome videos around not only approvals but other functionalities that you can find in Office 365. And as well, you can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, wherever you like and however you want. So, well, let's begin. So the session basically is going to be approvals that you can find in Office 365 environment. I will be focusing on Power Automate and Microsoft Teams and trying to showcase you what you can use and what you can have within these two platforms. The first most important information about approvals is that this technology is using Dataverse. So whatever you create around approvals is being stored in Dataverse tables. And there are like 5 major tables that are being used around approval processes, both by Microsoft Teams and Power Automate. So the approval table is the one that is like a header table where Power Automate or Teams is storing general information around the approval, like title, description, who is the initiator of the approval, whether notifications should be sent, whether reassignment should be allowed. So everything that you're, let's say, defining at the level of the approval. Now, in approval request table, technology is saving all single or every single task that is being generated during the approval. So if you create an approval that is assigned to, for example, 3 employees, then in approval request, there are going to be generated 3 records or 3 rows, 1 for each approval task. Approval responses is similar, but it stores every single response to a task. So once a task is completed, there is the information stored around the outcome. And finally, the flow approval is a table that is being used to keep information around these Power Automate flows, which are waiting for an approval. So not only assign task and then moved on, but are still waiting for the approval. And flow approval is not really taking place in Microsoft Teams approvals. Then finally, user table is the one that is being used to store information about participants, right? So the users. All right, so let's move on. Did you know, what is that? Did you know that tasks are environment related? That means that if you're creating a task, either in Power Automate or in Microsoft Teams, information behind the task or from that task is always stored in a specific environment, so in Dataverse of that specific environment. And that unfortunately creates this experience where you don't have a single entry point to see all the tasks assigned to you across all possible environments. Well, you can build it yourself, but if you're trying to see your tasks, you first need to switch to a specific environment and then to access the tasks. I'll show that in a moment. How does it look? Now, how can we create the tasks? Well, I already spoiled that information because I said that this webinar is going to be around Microsoft Teams and Power Automate. But basically, these tasks that I'm speaking about can actually be created, let's say, through UI of these 2 platforms. So you can either assign this task through Microsoft Teams various places, or you can create a cloud flow which is assigning these tasks. Obviously, because I mentioned that tasks are actually being stored in Dataverse, you can as well create them, let's say, manually by fueling or populating the tables with the proper data. So this way you could mimic behavior of, for example, Microsoft Teams or Power Automate, although this is not that very much supported scenario. Those supported ones are obviously these when you achieve that goal of assigning a task to UI. Okay, so now when we decide to create an approval process in Power Automate, there are just like 3 actions that we can choose from to start an approval process. So first we can create an approval process, which is simply initiating the approval, but it's not waiting for the approval, so the workflow can move on. Or we can choose to start and wait for approval. In that scenario, the workflow not only assigns tasks, but it is as well waiting until the tasks are completed. And then the wait for approval action is used in those scenarios when you want to first initiate an approval process, then execute some business logic in between, and only after the business logic is executed to then wait for all the approvals to be completed. So these three actions we have in Power Automate when speaking about creating and using approvals. Now, whichever action to initiate approval we choose, sorry, well, that was okay, sorry. Now, when speaking about using the approvals or accepting approvals, what we have to do is to, if an approval process has notifications turned on, we can navigate to the inbox of our Outlook, and we can complete a task directly from inbox. Or we can navigate to this approvals section in Power Automate portal, and there you have a list of all tasks which are assigned to you. Now, when speaking about Microsoft Teams, this scenario is a bit different because there we have a new approvals application that you can simply find in application store and then pin it to your into your app bar or taskbar. And from there, you can navigate directly to approvals. And here you can as well see what approvals you have in that specific environment. So I'll just be scrolling that or showing that in a live show in a moment. Now, what kinds of approvals we have in Power Automate? Basically, there are 4 types, but when, let's say, doing a distinct on those 4 types, it turns out there are just like 2 types. So first is approve reject, where everyone must approve. And this kind of approval is waiting either for everyone to approve, as it states. So then every user has to express their approval. But it is also waiting for the first rejection. So whatever comes first, either everyone approves and then it's waiting for like 5 approvals, for example, if you assign the task to 5 assignees. But if any of these assignees decides to reject, then the approval process ends. Then approve reject, first to respond, allows users again to choose only between approve and reject outcomes, but it's waiting just for the first response, whether approve or reject. Now, the 2 other options, so the 3rd and 4th, around custom responses are behaving quite similar, although the custom responses wait for all responses allows you to define your own custom responses, 1 or more actually custom responses like okay, not okay, or yes, no, or I think so, or I don't think so, or like whatever you want. However, in that scenario, workflow is going to wait for every response. So it's not going to be terminated before or if a response is negative, but it will be waiting. If you assign the task to 5 assignees, it will be waiting always for those 5 responses. Then speaking about custom responses, wait for 1 response. For the first response actually behaves the same as the second approach, as the second scenario. So it is just waiting for the first response out of these available custom ones. All right. Now, when speaking about Microsoft Teams, how we can actually extend those basic approvals to Microsoft Teams? The first scenario or the first approach is to use a thing that is called adaptive card. So once we initiate an approval in Power Automate, then one of the dynamic outcomes we can use from that approval is a Teams adaptive card that we can post by using an action called post adaptive card in a chat or channel. Obviously, that adaptive card should be sent to a particular user, so it should be sent to a chat. If we send it to a channel, then unfortunately it is just waiting for like the first response, so whoever has an access to the channel can simply complete that task and the approval is done. So when speaking about this kind of integration between Power Automate, Cloudflow, and Microsoft Teams, you first need to rethink your business logic, because this approach would not allow you to like post 5 different adaptive cards to find users and collect responses from every one of them. Or what we can do is to go into Microsoft Teams and initiate or start approval straight from Microsoft Teams, and then either from an authoring window, so the area where we create a message, or from the mentioned already approvals application. So yeah, this is how it looks like, as you saw. So here you can simply hit the button for the new approval, and this way you'll have an approval. Now, The one additional feature that we have in Microsoft Teams, which is unavailable in Power Automate, is templates, or are templates that we can configure or use to enhance the approvals experience. So apart from having the very easy or the regular approval scenario where you only assign a task to a specific person and that person has either to approve or reject, or you can as well define custom outcomes, Teams owner or Teams admin can define specific templates for specific purposes, like for requesting for a holiday leave, or for a sick leave, or for some, for example, reimbursements from from business travel, or even to request for the business travel, or to choose one of the existing templates that are already created so that anyone, either within a team or within the whole organization, can use them. So this is a quite cool feature. I'll show it in a moment how it works. Now, one important thing around approvals in Power Automate that we have all to be aware is that due to the platform limitation, it's about the Power Automate object persistence. An action that is waiting for an approval process to be completed cannot wait longer than 30 days. So after 30 days, if an approval is not completed, if all those tasks are not completed and requirements to continue flow are not fulfilled, then the action is going to be timed out, or will fail with the timeout error reason, and the whole flow is going to be displayed as failed in the runs history. However, when speaking about Microsoft Teams, there is no constraint around duration, because Microsoft Teams is not, approvals in Microsoft Teams is not running on Power Automate, and therefore data in Dataverse is actually being stored endlessly unless someone deletes it or creates retention policies. However, the approvals that we have in Microsoft Teams can last really long, so months, years, up to you. All right, so that having said, I will now switch to an application. So I'll just move it here to show you how this actually works, how this can be used. So first, I'll create a very simple Power Automate that I want to use to showcase you options that we have around approvals. So I mentioned to you that we have like 3 actions in approvals group. And these actions are, as you saw, create an approval, start and wait for approval, and wait for approval. Now in this scenario, what I want to do is to first create an approval, because what I want to do is to send myself this custom adaptive card to my Microsoft Teams channel, chat. This will be assigned to myself. There are multiple other options we can actually define when creating an approval. For example, you can define a link to a file that is being an object of that approval. You can as well define who is a requester, so it doesn't have to be the person who initiates the workflow. This can be someone else. Then you need to, or you can define whether you want the workflow to send notifications, those email notifications around the task being assigned, and about task, or sorry, and to allow or not allow to reassign tasks. And lastly, you can define attachments. However, right, so these attachments, you can as well add multiple attachments to an approval. So this is as well something you can supplement this approval with. Now, the next step I want to use is to send adaptive card to Microsoft Teams. And what I want to show you is that there are like 2 actions we can choose from when speaking about sending adaptive card to Microsoft Teams. So the first one is to post adaptive card and wait for response. And the second one is to send adaptive card in a chat or channel. For the purpose of for the purpose of approvals, we can't use the one that is saying wait for response, because it will simply not be, let's say, used properly and will fail. This scenario won't be executed with that kind of adaptive card. So for the purpose of sending an adaptive card with an approval, we need to choose the one that is called post adaptive card in a chat or channel. The next thing you have to do is to post that either in a chat with a Flowbot or in a channel. In my case, I'll use the chat with a Flowbot, and I'll again use myself to send this card to me. And lastly, the JSON of the card that is expected to be posted can be found as one of the dynamic outcomes of that create an approval action. And here you can find that dynamic outcome called Teams Adaptive Card, which is the last step you have to do to configure this action. And lastly, because I would like as well my flow to wait, therefore I need to use this action wait for approval and to provide the ID of the approval generated by the first action. So with that setup, the user is not only going to be sent this notification about approval to their email, because enable notifications is on, but as well they will be sent this notification to their chat in Microsoft Teams. So let's save it and simply test it. All right, and run. And so right now it will create and generate the approval. It will as well send adaptive card. However, it will not, let's say, stuck on this action because it's not waiting actually for the approval for the adaptive card to be completed, but it is waiting for an approval. And also what I already received is an email that I'll just show a second. Just need to open it in a larger screen. So there is the email, and come on, just open. And here in the email, you can see there is as well this actionable message. So with that, user can really directly approve or reject the task directly from their inbox. So they don't even have to navigate to anywhere in Power Automate portal or in Microsoft Teams. I won't complete it yet. I want to go as well to Microsoft Teams to show you how it looks like. In the moment when the team is loading, I will show you this approval section in Power Automate portal. So here, approval section, it tells you or it shows you a couple of information that might be useful for you. So first, it shows you all the tasks which you as a person are assigned in this specific environment, right? Because I can switch to a different environment, and their approval section is going to display different information, obviously around approvals generated in that specific other environment. So directly from here, you can either approve or reject, or if there is an approval with custom responses, you would have, like in this case, an option to select the response, right? So this is the custom response. When speaking about the approve reject responses, you even have the buttons to directly respond from the line. You don't even have to open the whole form. Now, under the send, obviously you can find information about all these approvals or all these tasks that you as a person have initiated. And here you have information as well to whom it was sent. And as well from here, you can cancel that task, that approval process. So if you cancel it, then the flow is going to be resumed. However, the approval action is going to have an outcome called canceled, and that's it. And lastly, under the history, you will find all the information about all these approval processes that have been assigned to you but are already completed. So here you can see all those tasks that you have completed and the outcomes that you gave them. And let's begin about Microsoft Teams. Once I navigate to my private conversation with the Flowbot, because it's actually the Flowbot that is, let's say, handling this approvals scenario. So as the conversation loads, you'll see that there is a new adaptive card sent to me. It just have to load. By the way, if you have any questions to what I'm showing, or to extend some information around what I'm talking about, then simply please use the chat window to post those questions. I'll try to answer them as they arrive during small gaps that I will be doing. Yeah, just loading some time in my case. I'll be back to that section. First, I will navigate to approvals application just to show you what we have in there. Hopefully, this application will load a bit faster than the chat, or maybe not. Right, it seems I simply can't do that. Can't open that in a separate window. It has to load because this is the next step that I need to show you how that feature works. I'll try to open the Teams in the application window, not in a browser. So bear with me. I hope it will be resolved in a second, or in a minute. Maybe it's more feasible to achieve. Honestly speaking, I have no idea why this web interface is loading so long. Well, it shouldn't be. Come on. All right, let's try with the application as it loads. On the other screen. So here's the application. Here I can navigate as well to the chat. And then under the chat, I should be able to access it faster. Now what's going on? Well, this is the downside of showing everything live, that some things might not work as expected. Although no idea if we have any kind of like an issue right now with Teams connectivity, because as you can see, both the web application and the desktop application are just working extremely slow. It's like they cannot access data. No idea what's going on in there. Still cannot load. There is something showing up slowly, so hopefully I will be able to continue this the webinar. So these tiles that you're seeing here, okay, there they are. So those are the adaptive cards that I sent to myself over last days, weeks, and so on. And this one is the adaptive card that I just sent to myself moments ago, or minutes ago actually, during the approval process I have initiated. So again, here I have the information from the adaptive cards, like its title, the description, by whom it was requested, and as well, from here I can either approve or reject, or if there were like custom responses, I can as well click this custom response and complete the approval. So this way I would be able as well to complete this approval, or the last place I can go that hopefully is going to work is the approvals application, where once I switch to the environment where that specific task has been created, I should be able to see it as well. So I need to switch from the Power Platform preview environment to testing environment, and here I will as well see the list of all these tasks which I just saw on the approvals in the approvals section on the received in Power Automate portal. And from here I can as well open these task details. I see the information by whom it was requested, for whose responses that task is still waiting, and again I can approve, reject, or reassign. I can as well cancel this request because I am as well the person who initiated it. So speaking about those multiple options you can complete the task, I'll choose the one in here and complete this approval. So with that, once I go back to the flow that I have just triggered, you'll notice that it is already completed. And as the response, or as the outcome, obviously there is only one, so the outcome is going to be the approve, right? So this is it. So with that, I just showed you how you can initiate an approval in Power Automate, but how you can complete it using really a variety of means, or in other places, like through an adaptive card, or through an actionable message in your Outlook, or even through Microsoft Teams. Now, speaking about these Microsoft Teams approvals, I'll get away from this browser version. What you can do as well is you can start an approval process from different places within an application. So the first place you can choose to work with approvals is actually the conversation within a Microsoft Teams channel. So once you navigate to a channel, you can hit the new conversation, or just have the conversation. And in here, what you have as well is this approvals application. What it does in here is actually storing these approvals information in a default environment. So when you initiate an approval directly in a channel, this will simply allow you to, this information here is going to be stored within a default environment. So this thing you need to be aware that it won't be, let's say, stored in the environment related to that particular team, but in just default one. So here again, you just need to define the name of the approval, to whom you want to send this approval, and then if you require all responses or just one, the description of the approval, whether you want to define custom responses, and whether you want to send it to a different environment. That option doesn't work because, as you can see, it doesn't work because I guess there is some kind of an issue in my environment, in my default environment, and therefore I just cannot send it anywhere else. Or maybe I don't have everything defined. So if I send it to myself, but still no, nope, it's not possible for me to switch to send it to a different environment. And I won't be as well able to send it to myself in this default environment because my tenant has a default environment switched to the one that doesn't have a database, and therefore this approval is not going to be generated. So sorry, maybe the database have been already generated, sorry. Or sorry, not, it hasn't been. So the reason why it doesn't work in my tenant is because the environment where the default environment in my tenant doesn't have a database. So instead, what I can do, instead of generating an approval in the chat window, I can navigate directly to approvals. And in this application, I can simply initiate an approval process as well. So here I need to switch to the environment that does have a database because that one doesn't. And straight from this place, I can again initiate an approval. And then what you see is that when starting a new approval in Microsoft Teams, I can either use the basic request, so the one that is actually following everything I mentioned before. So it is stored in those 3 databases, tables in Dataverse. It only allows you to define approve, reject outcomes or custom responses. You can wait for all responses or just for the first one, and blah, blah, blah. However, if your company has integration, if your company purchased services from eSign or Adobe Sign, the DocuSign or Adobe Sign, then what you can do as well is to start an approval process that as well goes through the e-signature steps to, for example, sign a document in Microsoft Teams. And lastly, what you can do is to choose from the templates which are available for you to choose from as a team member of the specific team, or if there are any global templates, you can then choose from these global templates. Now, speaking about templates, if you're a Teams admin or basically the Teams admin or Teams owner, what you can do is to create a template. To do that, you simply need to navigate to the button to create a template inside the approvals application, and then you can start creating a new template. Now, first, what you have to do is to either choose an already existing template, so it will be used as a draft, as a fundament, the basics, and then you can customize it, or you can start from scratch. So I'll maybe use this business trip request as the basics for my new template. And so the next step that will be displayed is sorry, right. So I'd say fields which you have to define, provide values. So this is how this template looks like at the moment. And then what you have to do is to define whether you want to allow this template to be used only by specific people, or only by the specific team, or by anyone within the organization. So I'll now choose the organization wide. And so next steps you have to do is to customize that template. So first you can rename it, choose the description, choose the category, and then what you have to do is to customize, or what you have, or what you can, to customize the layout. Now, what is important around this layout is, as you possibly might see, it's not being created by, for example, Adaptive Card, but it's being handled and created using Microsoft Forms technology. That means that the information from these custom responses is not going to be directly available in Dataverse, but is going to be saved with the Microsoft, through the Microsoft Forms service. So you can then choose one of the 3 available fields like choice, text, and date. And once you're satisfied with the outcomes, you can as well define the acceptance flow for that specific template. So you can as well define whether the request should be a direct manager of the approver, of the requester, or maybe specific requesters, or maybe that the requester should be able to select who they want to send this approval to, and as well whether you want to allow for custom responses or the built-in responses. Okay, and then last step is to confirm that you're satisfied with what you see. And once it is published, anyone within the organization, so here I have organization-wide templates, I can switch to, for example, templates for teams for tests, where is this leave request, or for specific people. However, I don't think I have any, nope. So now if I navigate back to application, I will be now able to create new approval request. And in a moment, there should be, this list should be refreshed so that there it is. So that there is this organization-wide template business travel. So now me as a requester, I can simply provide all this information. Fill in the business travel dates. Right, and simply send for approval. So I again send it to myself, which is possibly not possible, not feasible, because there was an error, or maybe there was another error in that environment, which it just can't handle today. There's so many of them. But nevertheless, once it is sent, I should be able to see that request in my list. Will it be here? No, it's not. So maybe I'll just try to do it again. This time with maybe the shorter one, so the request for leave. And I will as well choose a different assignee. So again, from today until tomorrow, and then send. Yeah, fingers crossed that this time this template, no, it's not going as well to work. Well, honestly, I have no idea what might be going wrong today with this team. These templates should simply create a nice looking approval with the fields, and as well send notification to approver that they have a new task to review and to approve or reject. I'm sorry that it doesn't work, but what you can do is to simply try and experiment with that feature on your own, in your own tenant, in your own Microsoft Teams. So this is what you can do to really see this in action, and I'll try to fix my tenant, my Teams as fast as possible. All right, so that were the basics with Microsoft Teams approvals. However, what I want to tell you now are those advanced scenarios that you can as well achieve by working directly on Microsoft Dataverse data. So first of all, I want to tell you what is happening anytime something happens within approvals. So what is going on through those scenarios that we can complete in approvals. So first, when a new approval is created, what Power Automate or Microsoft Teams is doing is populating data into tables. First, it's populating data in approvals table, where, as said, it's generating this general information around the title, description, who created the approval, about allow notifications, allow reassignments, and so on. And then the second table that is being populated is approval request. So where an information about every single task is being created. So the more assignees you choose in approval process, the more entries are going to be generated in approval request. All these entries are having their statuses set to active. Now, the next thing, what is happening once an approval is completed? So basically, the only information that is being actually written is happening within the approval request, so in the approval table and in approval responses when speaking about the completed tasks. So first, the original entry, once the approval is completed, is being set as inactive and is being updated with information about the outcome. And as mentioned in the beginning, for every task that has been completed during this approval process, a new entry in approval responses table is being written with information about the outcome. Now, what happens when a task is being reassigned? Basically here, the operation is only happening within the approval request table. So first, the original entry is being marked as inactive, and its status is being set to reassigned. And then the new entry is being created within the approval request table with a lookup to that original one, or the first one from which it was reassigned. And it contains GUID and lookup to that original entry. And that's it. So this is the only change that is happening when a task is being reassigned. However, when speaking about reassignment, there are some principles that Power Automate is following, Microsoft Teams is following as well. So when you try to reassign a task from UI, you won't be able to do that. So for example, you can't reassign this task to yourself, obviously, and you can't reassign the task to the person who created the task. And lastly, you are not allowed to reassign a task that you are not a current assignee of. So again, when working with tasks through Microsoft Teams or through Power Automate portal UI, you are not going to be even allowed to do that. There are going to be specific notifications displayed. However, when working on Dataverse, you can do anything you want. So if you will be creating like your own solution, just be aware that these principles are there and you should stick to them. Now, lastly, it's not lastly, or maybe it is. So what happens when a task is canceled? Because as you saw, if you're an initiator of the workflow, of the approval process, you're as well able to cancel the task. And so here, once you mark the task as, sorry, not the task, but the approval process as canceled, then in approval table, the entry related to this approval process is being set as canceled, inactive, completed, and so on. So all this information is being simply updated this way. All right. So what I would like to show you right now around these advanced scenarios is something that will possibly work. So for that, I will navigate to to my flows, and there I have a quite simple scenario that is called assign lots of tasks. And this is just a very simple workflow which does nothing but assigning a task and waiting for approval. So currently it is assigning a task to three employees, like to John, Stefan, and myself. So I'll just trigger it. And what I want to show you is that by working on Dataverse tables, you are simply allowed to automatically complete this approval whenever you want and under whichever circumstances you need. So by working on Dataverse information, you can, for example, create your custom solutions which are going to complete an approval if a specific percentage of responses is reached, or to complete any pending approval by automatically approve or reject it, or to reassign any task to anyone else, or to let's say cancel any pending task, any pending workflow, even if you're not an initiator of, even if you don't see that approval process under your approvals. So you can complete all these scenarios by building your own additional business workflows, which are going to help you in your logic. So For that, I have here a solution, and in that solution, I have a couple of examples. Now, one important information around canceling it is that I need to learn its ID. I don't have this ID displayed here, so to find it, I need to actually navigate to data and to tables. So solution for this could be that you first start approval, then read the GUID of the approval, and then you put an action that waits for the approval to be completed. Or you can simply manually do as I'm doing, so to navigate to tables, and there in approval table you can find the one that is now waiting for this approval to be completed. So in the meantime, what I will do as well is to open a second screen from John Researcher. So this is the second assignee who has been assigned a task in this approval process, and I will simply complete his task on his behalf. Okay. Right, so here is this task that has been just assigned like 2 minutes ago. So John is going to approve his task. However, as you remember, there were like 3 assignees, and this workflow is still waiting, even though that John has completed his task. So to resume it, as mentioned, I need to find its GUID. Hopefully, yeah, there is the list. Now I need to switch to all tables, then to find the approvals table is here. Then under approval, switch to data, and still have a couple of moments and minutes so I can show you how it works or how to achieve it. So as the data is being loaded, I also open a flow which I want to use in that scenario. And so the flow is going to be called, is going to simply complete approval. Right, so that one is quite okay-ish, I think. And all right, back to the data. So here I need to switch to all columns. And once the data is loaded, I simply need to find that entry that has just been generated like possibly 5 minutes ago. So I'll use a timestamp to identify which record was generated the moments, those 5 minutes ago. Really forgive me, no idea what changed in all these workflows, this environment that is now working so slow, despite the fact it was working quite okay as we were starting this webinar. Right, the workflow itself is quite simple, but you need to simply follow all these steps that I've mentioned around what is happening in Dataverse once a specific scenario is being completed. So, for example, when speaking about this completion, what we had to do was to simply update the approvals record with information about the outcome. So in this case, what the workflow is doing is getting information about all these assigned tasks and the approval record. So there are like two tables being queried, first the approval request and then the approvals. Then it's also getting other responses for current approval. So what this workflow is going to do is not only to complete this approval, but it's as well going to join existing responses and send them to the Power Automate, which is waiting for this process to be completed. And then it is concatenating a JSON body that is going to be sent to a so-called flow notification URI, which is an endpoint that has to be called to resume a specific workflow waiting for this approval process to be completed. And that flow notification URI URL you can find in flow approvals table. So this is where this information is stored. And finally, once all the information is prepared, request body is concatenated and prepared as well, flow is marking that existing approval as completed and calling that flow notification URI with that request body. What it is waiting for as the input variables is the approval ID, which I'm trying to obtain, and the outcome. So it will be 12/15/2022. There is no such record on this first screen, on this first page, so maybe it will be somewhere on the second. Right, let me search it again. Here it is. Yep, 11/32. No, it's not that one. That's definitely not that one. But this is 48. Sounds like the one I'm looking for. So here what I need to do is to copy this GUID and simply provide it as the entry information in the workflow, in that custom workflow, which is working directly on a Dataverse table. So it's not really touching any approval endpoints, which does not exist, but it's just working directly on information that either Power Automate and Microsoft Teams are storing. So it's doing really nothing else, right? And the outcome, let's say, is going to be approved. So let's run it now. You can see that this workflow is still waiting for approval, and it has just finished waiting for the approval, which means that my workflow has completed successfully. And what I can see is that we have one response because John, a researcher, has approved his task. The overall outcome of the approval is approved. Like every information that was provided, that should be provided to that dynamic outcomes has been sent as the input body, as the request body to that flow notification URI. And so the flow itself is resumed. So that was just one of the examples that I have prepared around working with Dataverse and approvals information, approvals data, that can help you to create your own custom logic around approvals. So to extend these basic functionalities with some more advanced scenarios, like as mentioned, for example, substitutions, so that you will be reassigning tasks to other users, to other employees, if those specific ones are on holidays, or that will allow you to complete approval processes when a specific percentage of responses is reached, or to complete any pending approval processes, for example, if a specific timeout is reached, and so on and so on. All right, and having that said, that is all from my side. I hope that despite those issues I had with Microsoft Teams, this webinar is informative for you. I hope that, well, if you have any questions, as said, you can write them on the chat. And now it's the moment to answer to your questions as well.
That's great, Thomas. Thanks a million. A few questions did come in there, so I'll call them out to you now, and you can maybe answer them if you can. So question, in an audit situation, how would you go about documenting approvals? Would admin search the Dataverse? And how are the retention settings here?
So basically, there is no retention settings on approvals in Dataverse unless an admin set them up. The documentation of approvals, there is as well nothing built in, so you have to create your own solution that is actually going through Dataverse data and is collecting this information, storing it somewhere for in maybe other table or in any other database of your choice. However, there is nothing yet built in.
Okay, thank you. Another question, is there a way to set comment mandatory when reject is clicked in an adaptive card? That you have to do a comment, I presume.
Right. So when speaking about adaptive card and approvals, you can let's say customize this adaptive card. So you can send a different adaptive card to the one that is actually being generated, although you need to keep the buttons section untouched because it contains the metadata that is being used by the Flowbot to resume an approval. However, if you customize it, there you can as well set that the comments field is mandatory. However, there is no such feature out of box. So if you depend only on the built-in adaptive card or the built-in approvals form, then you cannot set comments as mandatory for rejection scenario or for any other.
Okay. Is the adaptive card premium? I presume that's referring to the price there.
No, I mean, both approvals and adaptive cards in Microsoft Teams are not premium. So as long as you're not touching Dataverse actions themselves, like I showed you in the last demo, then all this solution is for free, even though it is actually storing information in Dataverse. However, it is using like a system account to read and write to these Dataverse tables. So for end users, this solution is considered as a standard. So it's under seeded licenses.
Okay, great, Thomas, thank you. We'll just do one more. In Teams template, can you set the approver by default based on some criteria?
As well, not. You can create a template for an approval that in this case is always sent to a specific approver, but that's the only configuration. So you can have multiple templates which are being sent to specific approvers, but it's not like if, for example, the requested amount for cost reimbursement exceeds €1,000, then this is going to be sent to Mr. John, otherwise to Mr. Smith, for example. So this is not possible in the out-of-box features of the solutions.
Okay, thanks very much, Thomas. On behalf of the ESPC community, thank you for taking the time today to complete this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me as well. And thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. This marks the end of the webinar. Thanks again. Take care and goodbye.
Bye-bye.